Live? Okay. Well, hello everybody. Hello the world. This is indeed an odd time to sit with the lecture. I'm sure most of you are busy with the election, so I thought I'd make this an election special. I actually brought in the 3 candidates plus the United States charts because I think it's a good study, astrologically speaking. Now I've been, well, first of all, I'm Sol. Hi, everyone. And I've been increasingly concerned with secondary progressions lately. It's important study in the world of astrology, and well, there's a lot written about it, but I find that a lot of students still struggle a little bit with how to use them. And this is what I will try to share some thoughts about today. Yes, so this is the image that I think, at least for me, describes the evolution. The lotus is used in many traditions, or in many, especially the Indian tradition, as showing the unfolding consciousness of life. And if you look at the crown chakra, I thought about that today, and it feels to me like, well, they say it's the 1,000-petaled lotus. And for me, it's such a good imagery for the unfoldment of our potential. The bud is the potential. You don't know what's in the bud until it's starting to unfold itself. And with each transit, with each progression, with each important progressive phase you go through, there will be another petal of this lotus that is starting to vibrating. If evolution goes well, that is, if there is actual growth. And there will be an unfoldment. And the difference between transits and progressions, and in this case, I will use secondary progressions and not the solar arc directions, which is something that I don't work a lot with, but the secondary progression where 1 day equals 1 year. And it sort of shows the unfoldment of inner awareness in relation to the transit that goes on in your life and the shifting of that focus depending on what lunar phase you are going through. So there's like this breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, the yin and the yang of everything. You have an outward extrovert or very dynamic experience. And then there's a period of breathing in again, where it's all being integrated, where you are processing the change, where you are reaching new levels of understanding of what goes on above, goes on below, what goes on within, goes on without. So as transits and progressions work together very, very tightly, actually, we get a very good opportunity to look into the evolution of the soul, which is basically what we are doing in evolutionary astrology. And it's all, of course, founded and based on the natal chart itself. Everything is grounded in the natal chart. The timing of events is very much a transit thing, but there will be something very special happening when there's a synthesis of the progressed, the natal, and the transit charts. Then you know for sure that you are looking at something very, very special for this person and their lives. So when we work with progressions, I like to use this lotus flower, this inner unfoldment as an imagery, a maturation of consciousness, if you like, a shift of focus. And it's pretty much clockwork, like anything else in the world of astrology. A lot of people, have felt that so intensely when their Mercuries, for instance, suddenly went retrograde by progression, and everything shifted. There's a huge shift of perception. Or when they're progressed retrograde or natal retrograde Venus suddenly went direct by progression. Suddenly there was like this extroverted phase coming in, and suddenly everything that's been gestating in the retrograde phase, every karmic healing that's been going on in the retrograde phase, is suddenly now ready to be expressed into the world. And this is, a very biological or way of seeing life. It's not like I have a goal, I reach the goal, and then I see another goal and I try to get to that goal as well. It's not that kind of young mentality or masculine oriented mentality. Like if you just work hard enough with yourself, you'll be, you'll be done in like 3 months. And this is not how karmic healing works. It is a much more subtle process, and it ain't over till it's over. You have to sort of go through it properly and really have the understanding mature on the inside in order for the entire life to move forward. And in those phases, which is so strange sometimes when we just look at the natal chart and then we superimpose it onto the transits, we might have expected a lot more from certain transits, but then again, the whole progress chart might show that this person is going through a very introverted phase. And that's like staying inside the house, not going out to meet the actual transits. The transits will operate differently. So this is when you can kind of fine tune your capacity to see where the client is at that particular moment in time when there's a client approaching you, or where you yourself is at any given time in your life. So it's really an art, and it's not always like, because there's so much data to relate to when you have 3 charts, and then you have some, prospects of the future, and there's a lot of information and in astrological information going on at the same time. So it might not be so easy to get every bit of it. It might be a little overwhelming to begin, but how we can kind of use it is that we can start using it as a just automatically when we see a chart, just like, where's the secondary progressions? I got to see the secondary progressions, and not necessarily be tempted to overanalyze it or interpret it immediately. Let it sink in, sit with the client and let it be there at that, in the side mirror, if you like, and you just refer back and you feel in, and then you'll see how the unfolding of the understanding of how you can use these 3 charts together in a reading and really get some very helpful and precise understanding of where the client is at that given moment when they come to see the astrologer. For yourself, I mean, if you want to study your own charts, it's very easy to go into projection mode and start projecting things on your own chart and think, oh, I wonder what that means. Like, ooh, yeah, I'm going to have something happening in my charts next year. You have no idea. Next year is many moon cycles away, many full moons away. A lot can happen between now and then. So jumping to conclusions is very hard with the secondary progressions, mostly because it's such a detailed work to see both the progressions, let's say in a year's time, and then the unfolding transits that occurs before that. You might get some general ideas and see the whole picture and get an idea about the structure of what is unfolding, and especially relating to the nodal theme. But at the same time, it might be a little bit hard to see precisely what this is all about. now. The solar lunar cycle is, of course, it is what I'm going to focus on this in this particular session, mostly. The progress chart is vast, you know, like it's we could do anything from Mercury retrogrades to Venus retrogrades and Mars retrogrades and angles shifting and nodal rulers and stuff like that. So, but within the time span that we have available today, I think it's good to stick with the solar lunar cycle. So the sun and the moon, from a psychological point of view, is how we process and experience life. It's kind of like our persona, if you like. In the evolutionary astrology model, we also have an understanding of the moon as something that comes from the past. It's very instinctual. It's very often very subconscious, and it's something that we're very used to. It's our comfort zone, and we can relate it back to the cave story from Plato, where you have that lunar experience with everybody inside the cave, you know, tied, chained, not being able to see things for what they are, unaware of the greater world. And then you have that one person setting himself free and breaking away from the cave and coming out and just seeing the sun and seeing the world and seeing everything for the first time. And this is how you can see the evolution between the sun and the moon. The moon is what we are familiar with. It's very habitual, and anything that's a habit is karmic. Doesn't mean it's bad habits. You might need some of these. I mean, it also pertains to your body and what you need in order to survive on this planet. So we can't eliminate the moon entirely, but what we are purifying from the moon while we are alive is our dependencies, it's our addictions, it's our fears, it's our karmic repetitions, together with the South Node and, of course, Pluto. Now, when you see the solar lunar cycle, you can also see a little bit about which lunar node, without taking into consideration, for instance, what kind of action is going on the nodes, whether it's inhabited South Node or if you have a planet on the North Node. But you know, from the very first seed of the new moon to the full moon to the balsamic moon, there is a growth, there is a gestation, there is a birth of consciousness. And for instance, people who are born before the full moon tend to be, especially further towards the new moon they come, very instinctual and might have to do things over and over again because it's the beginning of a new cycle from a soul perspective. And therefore, there's no wisdom in a way pertaining to certain experiences in life. And there's a great deal, a great need to become aware of instead of just acting, just reacting. And they might be more individuals with that kind of lunar phase in their chart, might be a little bit more sensitive to what's going on the South Node. And then you get to the next chapter, the full moon, and you have this push and pull between the past and the now. And then further down the road, the future, there's like a conflict between the past and the now, you know, the person you want to be, and then the person you're trying to grow out of. And then the moment it starts moving towards the balsamic phase, it becomes again, perhaps, you know, not always, but it's more North Node oriented. It's starting to grow in wisdom. I define wisdom as intelligence plus experience. You can have a lot of intelligence, but if you lack the experience, you might not always be as wise as you would love to be, or as would be healthy to be quite honest. So even, you know, there are models, you've seen them before. If you stuck your head into EA, you know that, you know, the phases are very much, according to Dane Rudyard, specified, you know, like they are specific. You can get all of the lunar phases if you look it up, and then you can see how specifically, you know, your lunar phase is oriented towards how you see the world, how you experience the world, and how you process the world. The solar lunar cycle in the progressed chart is therefore extremely important. You will notice immediately when the moon changes progressed sign. It's like, doink, here we are, a new chapter. Oh my goodness, I just went from being very extroverted to just wanting to be home. The lunar, the moon shifts from Gemini to Cancer, or from Libra to Scorpio. Or you just come out of the Sagittarius lunar phase and you've had all these great ideas, and then boom, suddenly you're in Capricorn territory and you have to do something about it. You can't just talk about it anymore. You have to actually do something about it. And then suddenly you're starting to fix your life in ways you never thought of before. And I honor all the cycles. You are where you are when you're there. You can't really push it, can you? And this is the thing I think us humans, we might benefit a lot from actually, you know, respecting in the time that comes, because we tend to push things. It's like, I should have been done like yesterday, but that's not happening. It takes the time that it takes. And of course, through the aid of astrology and becoming conscious, and great healers and people who are there to help you out of the past, move away from the traumas and the fears and the restrictions and the limitations that you experience, there will be greater growth. Like you kind of accelerate the process, but you're still in certain phases. That's why, you know, sometimes when people come to me and they have like a progressed lunar phase in, let's say, Taurus, and they say, I really want a relationship and I've been struggling really hard to get one. And they're like ahead of themselves. They want to be in the progressed lunar Scorpio phase, and they're in Taurus phase. It's not always like that, but very often it feels to me, I see clients who are in the lunar Taurus phase and they need to connect with themselves. They need to connect with their own values. They need to learn to be alone, love to be alone. They need to fall in love with their own lives and fall in love with themselves and fall in love with their resources and talents. And if there were a lot of other people inside that bubble, that process might have been destroyed. So, you know, you get a real nugget of gold that you can inform the client. But, and since, you know, the moon changes quite quickly, there's like this 13 degrees a year, so about a degree a month. That's good news. People don't have to wait so long. Very often people don't like to wait so long. It's like, we see that a lot when people come in for, you know, like just before a long standing transit of Pluto, and you're like, oh, I don't think there's any quick answers here. There's no quick fix to this one. And teaching people about their progressed lunar phase without even mentioning where it is, I mean, they might not understand what you're saying, could give them a sense of purpose and mission and peace with the exact phase that they're in at that particular time. The sun changes about a degree per year, and so that's more chronological. But these two things, if you have those two inside, you can easily go back and forth in time very quickly and see that, okay, so in May, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like you can count very quickly, because 5 months ahead of when they saw you, you see that the moon is making such a important and vital aspect to a grand cardinal cross in their chart, for instance. And then you can say, go back and see the transits, and then you get some real information that could be giving you an understanding why this person came to you in the first place, for instance. And it might also be something that is still unfolding and hard to, you know, process. again, how we process life, and you can help them really process the experience in a very creative way. So it's extremely valuable to have these, you know, I don't know how I could live without the progressions. Yeah. So I don't know, man, this world is, it's strange. You know, last year I started having this song in my head, The Doors, People Are Strange. And I started seeing these images of Dali, you know, Salvador Dali, who is this Taurus painter from Spain, who made all these surreal paintings. His most famous is about these melting clocks. And it reminded me of, like, I think realities are melting. There is something cooking, and I felt it so strongly with the fires of the Amazon. It was like my heart was bleeding. And then Australia, and then COVID, and then 2020, which been it's been intense for a lot of people to watch. And on a side note, I hope you take good care of yourself with this upcoming Neptune square the nodes. That's, for me, is the signature of something that's extremely surreal. So the United States, you know, is taking up a lot of space in media and in our minds and hearts. It's kind of like the Greek Empire turning into the Roman Empire, turning into the, you know, Europe turning into the United States. It's kind of like that heritage we're talking about. And the gods are thriving as usual with displaying their taste for drama, and you know, it's like these archetypes that are the gods are still living out their full potential on earth in our consciousness. As we're speaking, we see it every day. You can see the archetypes pop up every day. And that's how I see the planets, you know, as the pantheon. And these are the gods we are looking at, the archetypes, the essences. So with the United States, I use the Sibley chart, which gives it a Sagittarius rising. This is a whole sign houses chart. Many people would probably disagree using this one. I tend to flip-flop between house systems. And I really appreciate the whole sign houses. But especially for countries, I look at the whole sign houses. And with the Sagittarius rising, there's, you know, I've seen astrologers dispute the actual chart for the United States. I get it, you know, like there are, you know, many ways to put the actual event to a certain date or the timing, but this is probably the one that has been used the most. And I want you to observe certain things. You know, there's so much going on in this chart just by transits, but when you look at the progressions, you'll see there's more going on. Now, United States is kind of like, we look to the United States, you know, whatever goes on there comes here. Like when Nixon said war on drugs, suddenly the whole world had war on drugs. So it's kind of like we're looking to the United States. And right now we're seeing a country that's going through some challenges in terms of their constitution and the political and social and economical structures that this country rests upon. And Saturn been crossing already Pluto twice, and will cross it again in just mid-November. Pluto will, of course, also have his famous Pluto return for the first time in the United States history in not so long. So we are in a time where a lot of this karma that is Pluto in Capricorn is coming up to the surface. And it's not just the United States karma, it's kind of like the karma of the world in a way. I'm not into blaming. Of course, I can do it, you know, like anybody else who's human, but I tend to see, what can this teach me about me? You know, like I want to learn. And I think, you know, when it comes to one thing, earthlings, we have to deal with now. It's not just the crisis of the earth itself, it's the reason why we have this crisis. It's not just the overpopulation, it's how we use the resources, of course. And in this whole sign houses, Pluto is in the second house of natural resources and wealth and money. And there's also this slavery karma in it, you know. According to esoteric sources, that was the one thing they should have not perpetuated when they left imperialistic Britain, who, you know, had created their, you know, huge empire all over the world and using a lot of slave labor to get there. You know, in certain forms, for me, slavery is somebody who's underpaid, you know, somebody who's not getting valuable pay for their money, somebody who's being owned by the banks. That's slavery. And modern slavery is underpaid people who are working for large corporations, for instance. And we see a lot of it. I think a lot of people are starting to feel this like really intensely. And this is part of, you know, the whole current Pluto return conflict that is not just the United States conflict, it's the conflict of the world. The United States, it's kind of like our mascot, you know, no offense, you know, but it's the country that sort of, you know, was the new hope. It was the new country. It was the place that was supposed to become paradise. And the old school sort of tagged along and, you know, ended up polluting the place, the consciousness, the minds. Now there's a lot of fun going on, you know. There will also be a Neptune opposite Neptune very soon, which is Pluto conjunct Pluto, Neptune opposing Neptune. Wow, that's the transpersonal planets coming in. It's time to spiritualize, in other words. Something is really changing. Now that's the most evident. There will also be actually a Uranus return, which is extremely interesting. So all the three outer planets are playing. At the same time, Saturn will conjunct the South Node. It will also affect the moon. The moon in mundane charts is very much related to the people, And the people of the United States, they carry this moon in Aquarius vibe, the whole spectrum, from the most brilliant minds to the most traumatized family histories there is. You know, it can be disassociation. We know that, we who study astrology, like a lot of uprooting, people who are, you know, it's very close to the fourth house, a sense of identity. Who are you? Who are we? Where do you come from? You know, everybody comes from some place else where they're not actually born. Like they all have, it's like the whole world came to the United States and the United States became one country. Now, that's not the case just for the United States, but particularly for the United States, that's the case. It's a country of immigrants, as is a lot of other countries, but in particular, this one is the promised land. You know, anybody could come here and make their, you know, have the American dream happening, the prospect of a better future. That's very Aquarian. It's extremely Aquarian. And Trump, Mr. Trump, I'd like to call him because I don't think he's going to be president for so much longer. He said that the American dream was broken and it needs to be reinvented. And according to him, he was the solution for this reinvention. For me, that's a very Neptunian thing. It's also a very moon in Aquarius thing. You know, we want to have an upgrade. We want to have a better life. And that was true for the post-war generations. Like after the Second World War, yes, that was possible. Most of the people, like 90% of the people, I think, I could be wrong about the numbers, recession, but like they will have less opportunities than their parents. So yeah, it's time to reinvent something. And if you look at the secondary progressions, you'll see something extremely, extremely interesting. Because if you just take down, 1, 2, moon going 1 degree per month, okay, in Aquarius. Now, I don't have the dates for that, but that would be a good astrological study. When did the progressed nodal axis move into Capricorn? We know how Capricorn is very heavily run by Saturn and Pluto because their nodes are there, and the planetary nodes of Jupiter are also there. So it's such a loaded part of the zodiac. It carries the history of the ages in such a way, especially these last 10 degrees of Capricorn, is like when the lunar nodes transit went through those first 10 degrees backwards, when the lunar nodes went through Capricorn, I had flashbacks basically from, I was thinking about the Second World War. I was kind of obsessed by it. I saw numerous films on Netflix about it. Like, I just couldn't get enough. I just wanted to know everything about the First and the Second World War. And then I started thinking about the plague. All these things, is like history. It's in our genes, it's ancestral, it's cultural, it's conditioned through the ages. And this is exactly where the lunar nodes of the United States are for the right now. And as you can see, Pluto has moved across this. It's very slow movements in secondary progressions, especially when it comes to the outer planets, and especially when it comes to Pluto. It hasn't moved a lot. But it is at that very last degree in Capricorn, and it's going to be there for quite a while. We're not talking about a year or two. We're talking about 50 years or so, and recently the progressed lunar phase just crossed it. And we've seen so much stirrings in the United States. It's been I have so many friends in the United States, and I've seen their grief and their upset and their horror and their pain with everything that's been going on. It's been really shaking at the core in many ways. There's been talk about civil war. There's been fear about a total polarization between people. The new moon entered Aquarius not so long ago, and it coincides with the election, which most likely, I can't really see how Trump can win this one. Most likely Biden will win. And it's not really solving any problems. Probably, there's still this Pluto return. There's still going to be a lot of stuff to kind of like become conscious of, not just as the United States, but like for us entirely as a world. We have to start to live sustainable. We can only have one type of economy, and it has to be a sustainable one. And that is, the tearing down of all our security, of everything we found wants to give us at least a brief moment of peace, is that when we have enough money, we will survive. There's food in the fridge. I don't have to worry about the bills. Okay, I'm fine. I'm willing to give a lot to have that feeling. I can't think about, the poor people, the poor children in Bangladesh who are sewing my clothes, or, I don't have the luxury to think about that, because I'm also just a slave, but I'm a little bit differently placed in the system. So this COVID crisis, though, it's an excellent opportunity for us to actually change the system, and it depends on how long it's going to draw out. But I think people are getting a little impatient with it. Well, when the earth gets sick and the whole of humanity gets in a way sick, when we have a pandemic, it's a karmic and collective. It's a collective karma. And we have to go through karma. We can't go around it. And I think it's a great opportunity for humanity to actually have an experience of, progression. Maybe this lunar phase in Aquarius will birth new visions, will give us new visions, will help great thinkers come up with great ideas, how we can survive and thrive on this planet. There's something else going on. Mercury is also in Aquarius, and it's very close. It's getting closer, at least, to the natal moon of the United States. So on the one hand, there's this Capricorn karma happening in the United States, as we can see by the transits, Saturn on the south node, Pluto return, etc., and so forth. And then there's this Uranus energy coming in, like there's going to be a Uranus return. Not yet. I mean, Uranus is still just getting through those 10 degrees in Taurus, but it will take a real big jump into the mid degrees of Taurus during the first few months of 2021. And then it will, it will get out of Taurus eventually in a couple of years, and then it's going to settle itself in Gemini. And, I've done quite a bit of studies on people born with Uranus and Gemini, and it's a very vibrant generation and generations, because there was one at the late 1900s, and then again post-war there was another one, and there's like this natural genius in it. It's a very Uranian, Uranus is good in a earth, in a air sign. It's also the place of the Uranus planetary nodes. So we might see some real positive evolution towards the Aquarian vibe, the solidarity, the we're in it together kind of thing. We have to use our minds and our hearts, of course. I mean, we have to think more group oriented. So that's like the contrast with the coming time. And here's the actual transits for this particular moment, which I think, let me check my watch, good. It's just for fun, I just, haha, look at that. The North Node has recently been pushing on that Mars button. No wonder it's been a little bit tense, Mars been retrograde and everything, and then the lunar nodes on the United States Mars on top of that. So yeah, that tension is absolutely something that I guess a lot of Americans can feel and experience for the time being. And it happens to be on Mr. Trump's sun. He is born around that time with his sun in Gemini, and that's probably why he became a person who managed to divide the country. It always reminded me of the Romans. I have a friend who's always talking about the Roman history, and it's always so fun. It triggered my curiosity, because I wasn't very into the Romans. I was more a Greek person. But there was a podcast I heard once, and the guy who talked, he said that, well, the Romans, it was a Mars, worshiper of Mars. It was kind of like a war cult in a way, imperialism, fighting, honor, even when they lost, they wouldn't admit to losing. It was like, no, we didn't lose. They turn it into something else. They wouldn't be defeated. Like defeating a Roman would be the worst thing you could do to anybody. That was top of embarrassment for them. The problem was in peaceful times, because the Romans didn't always go to war. They went to a lot of wars, but they didn't always go to war. But they had moments of peace as well. But then they had like their inner tension. And it's the same classic thing, the elite and the working force, the soldiers and the poor peasants and everything, and how the elite kept their control, and how they suppressed the votes of people who didn't have money or who were not as high up in the hierarchy as they were. So they divided the people into two distinct groups. And when they didn't fight an external enemy, they tended to fight each other. Sometimes I hear this argument that Trump was a good president because there were no wars in international areas during his reign. And I thought, yeah, that's interesting. It's like for the first time in a long time, there's been like a peaceful thing. You know, United States haven't meddled in anything for a long time. And the drones of Obama, you know, and stuff like that. But I you know, there's been some small things, but not like a war. And then I thought, okay, so in peaceful times, this Martian energy, what does it do? You know, they start fighting each other. And you see this on the results. It's like a very fair split. It's like split in half. And that's such a Mars in the 7th house thing, right? It's like if you don't fight them outside, you're going to fight inside. So there's something with this fighter, the Mars, the archetype of the soldier, that needs to be properly understood, especially now that Chiron is in Aries and natal Chiron in America's chart is also in Aries and it squares Pluto, just to make it more fun, and it opposes Saturn in Libra. So there's this whole thing with justice, injustice, fairness, freedom, you know, and aggression, and, you know, sovereignty. In many ways, the pioneers, a pioneer is a Mars thing, right? It's an Aries thing. If you're a pioneer, you're an Aries, you know? The pioneers conquered the United States. So the pioneers don't like to have rules on their, you know, don't tell me what to do. You know, you don't get to tell Aries people what to do. You know, they want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. That's how they are. It's fire. It's intuitive. It's there immediately. So it's really a contrast to the needs of the world today, because the needs of the world today invites us to a bigger vision for us to actually cooperate. That's hard, especially when there's something deep inside that doesn't feel fair. It's not fair, you know? No, it's not fair. The game is rigged. And there's the whole conflict between, you know, the powers to be, the money men, the Wall Street oligarchs, you know, and then this soldier in the street, the man who just wants to have his land and be free and have enough money to survive and, you know, just live a good life, have a good life. So it is not fair. You know, there's something deeply unjust going on, not just in the United States, pretty much everywhere where there's a capitalistic model happening. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and the elimination of the middle class is starting to become a fact. And that is the potential for revolution. We're not going to take it anymore. Like, it's not, first of all, it's not sustainable for Earth. That's one of the things that it's trying to tell us right now. We have to have sustainable economy. Secondly, it's not sustainable for the dignity of man. A free man and a free woman is a dignified human being. You don't have to impose them with rules of this and that. They know what to do and how to do it. They, you know, like it's somebody that is not a number in a book, but it's a trusted individual, a participating, co-creating individual. Now that's an ideal. I'm aware of that, but that's the ideal of the Aquarian age. Show me what you've got. Give me your gift. Contribute into the whole. We want to see you. You know, we want to see you. Now, trust hasn't been given us from the day we started school, maybe from the day we were meeting our parents. Oh, this person can't do anything. We all grew up hearing that we didn't do stuff well enough. It is so easy to focus on the mistakes of a human being instead of focusing on the resources. It's so easy to project your own fear onto your children instead of projecting your own faith onto your children, especially if there's no faith. So it's just being handed over from generation to generation. You have to be small. Don't trust yourself. Don't contribute. And now we're here in a place where we outsource our problems and we put it onto the world to save us. The rage is growing like wildfire. And we can see that, you know, Mars has been touching that Chiron lately. The nodal axis has been on that Mars. There's a lot of stuff going on that we can all learn a lot from, and it pertains to anger and injustice and fairness and everything that would be like the ideals of Saturn in Libra, actually. It's not enough for everybody's greed, but enough for everybody's needs. That's what Gandhi said. And that has never been more true than right now. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I'm just going to take a look at my time. Oh, all right. So Joe, hey Joe, welcome. It's going to be so nice just for a little brief moment to have somebody who knows how to not flood Twitter with strange, ridiculous tweets. I just quiet, just a little bit of quiet. After a Gemini president, it would be nice to have a Scorpio one who is like a little bit careful with his words. Now, a lot of people have said a lot of strange stuff. I'm not going into any of the speculations. I'm just looking into the astrology. Me, personally, I think, well, it's hard to say how this will, you know, work out. But a shift, I think a shift would be good. Yeah. Yeah, the splitting and the constant fighting and people get tired. Doesn't matter who's right or wrong anymore because everybody's wrong and everybody's right. Everybody has something good and everybody has something bad. That's the case with most people. And it also relates back to Trump, you know. He has good aspects as well. You know, we've seen that as well, you know, occasionally. But the whole role of being a president is something I think a lot of people will just instantly react to. Oh, politicians, we don't like politicians, because we really don't like politicians. I say we, I mean the people seem to not like politicians. This is the natal chart, this one, of Biden. And he's born, this is so interesting, he's born in a full moon phase. It's not entirely full, you know, it's just recently dipped into Taurus. And that's the case with Kamala Harris. She's born with the perfect full moon, and it's also the case with Donald Trump. So it's something full moonish going on with these three people. Pence, I don't know, he's more anonymous. Harris is turning out to be a prominent figure. I think she will take a very leading position and she will get a lot of attention. But the thing that is interesting with Biden is that his transits are not so, whoa, I think Biden will win. Not at all. I don't see so much as like, huh, what? Like astrology is it working? I got a little confused when I saw his chart. So you can see that, you know, that's probably why he got these rumors on him, you know, being less than, you know, like so many pedophile rumors going around these days. So yeah, somebody with a Scorpio 12th house, very often the 12th house people actually are scapegoated, and especially if there's a Scorpio thing going on as well, they become like the public figure, like a public, how do you say, trash bin. The 12th house is where you have hidden enemies. Isn't that what they say? Hidden enemies. He's also gone through a massive amount of deaths in his life. And that you can see with that smacked 12th house in Scorpio. He lost so many very close people in his life, his sons and, you know, people very close to him. So he's gone through quite a bit of loss. He's also Uranus in Gemini, interesting. And a very early Pluto in Leo. And my daughter said, why do we always get boomers for presidents? They've been following the election more than I have. It's like, I don't get it. We don't want the boomers. She's 13. And these are the oldest presidential candidates we've had ever, I think, you know. It's very strange and ironic, and as we are moving into the new age, that we are having that experience. But it's also part of, if we relate it back to the United States chart with the Capricorn things going on, struggling with that Uranus Aquarius thing, and next year Saturn will square Uranus as well 3 times, from Taurus to Aquarius, where we will have this conflict of the new and the old coming up, not just in the political life, which is the larger macrocosm, but also in our own personal life. It's like, oh God, I'm this person, like I'm detained by the past. I want to move to the future. I have to rebel something in order to get there. And that's very often the tension between a square between Uranus and Saturn. Now, the interesting thing with this chart, though, is that there are some very you know, he's recently out of the progressed new moon phase in the 12th house in Aquarius. So he's kind of like tuning in on the American soul in many ways. It's understandable that he was the candidate in many ways. There are some things in this progression that I'm like, oops, I'm not sure about this Chiron on the North Node thing going on over here. He's born with Chiron on the North Node. And Chiron, yeah, we still have a lot to learn about Chiron. But it's that woundedness. It's that actually it can actually be somebody who actually have a lot of wisdom, who has a lot of grace, who has a lot of pain inside themselves, and who had gone through massive cycles of personal challenges. You know, sometimes Chiron is the broken hero, and it sometimes describes the flaws of the hero, you know, bad timing or indiscretion or anger, or, you know, stuff that kind of prevents the hero from reaching his goals or her goals. And probably had a lot of those experiences, and it could have humbled him. So it's something that, you know, like, something that is really humbling with that particular aspect there. So what I see mostly, like if Biden came in for a little reading, I would say, recently a new 30-year-old cycle, you know, because the moon, the lunar nodes will take, 28 years approximately to go an entire zodiacal cycle to get to a new lunar phase. And by that time, the sun very often shifted signs. So it's like when there's a new moon progressed lunar phase, there's a new chapter happening. And we can rewind a little bit. It's been a while. I actually brought in the chart for the lunar progressed lunar new phase. Let's see if I just can find. That was in 2019. So it was actually last year, May last year. And this is probably around the time when, you know, they started preparing for the election, and Biden kind of like knew that he would most likely become the candidate, even though nothing was decided yet. He probably knew that, okay, I'm going to go for this one. And being in the 12th house in Aquarius, he suddenly became not just a local guy. You know, you had to be very interested in American politics if you knew who Biden was. Internationally, me, who's like a not too interested in politics kind of person, I'm like, oh, I heard his name, but I know nothing about the guy, you know, like I just heard Robin Williams joke about him once. That's actually, you know, the first time I heard his name. Thank you, Robin Williams. So that's the level of my ignorance. But with this new moon in Aquarius in the 12th house, he became world famous. Tunk. Suddenly people in China knew who Joe Biden was. People who normally never knew nothing about nothing, they just knew who Donald Trump was. You know, like, so suddenly he became like massively famous, and his life started a new chapter. There is a long tradition of Aquarius presidents in the United States. That's the kind of things I know. I was like, okay, what astrology signs are the presidents? You know, Reagan, for instance, Lincoln, you know, Roosevelt. There's a lot of Aquarian presidents. And his progressed sun is in the sign of the people of the United States. So it's understandable. You know, it's also understandable that, you know, there's been quite a few Leo presidents and stuff like that. But this Aquarian thing seems to be extremely essential for the soul of America. All right, so let's see the actual transits. Not much going on. The sun is in the 12th house, back to the 12th house again. He's coming in on his solar return. That's the thing. You know, I was a little worried about him yesterday. It must be quite stressful for him, this election with sun crossing his Mars. That's pretty much what's going on here. Uranus is out of orb in terms of influencing that moon. It's getting into, you know, some opposition to Mars. Yeah. You know, the lunar nodes are not doing much. Let's see if we can dig out something. Ceres is on the south node. Now, interestingly, Ceres was the guardian of sacred law. So sometimes you see Ceres being very highly activated in the charts of politicians. Neptune is on his IC, if the time is right, which is probably also the most important transit in his chart, seeing as any outer planet moving around the angles is really changing a person's life. And Neptune being the public and all, this guy is going to have his privacy taken away from him, and he's aware of it, I'm sure. But he's a very private guy, you know, with all that 12th house Scorpio stuff. So we might see some we might see some dirty stuff coming in. And, you know, that's the war we're talking about, the civil war we're talking about is more a propaganda war than anything else. Is a war of consciousness. What do you believe in? So whatever happens, you know, with that Neptune going into his 4th house, because Neptune will finally go direct at the end of November. I'm looking forward to that, because that 18th degree of Pisces has been driving me crazy. I'm like, get out of that degree, please, hurry up, man. And then we have to endure the square to the nodal axis, and then maybe some of this strangeness will disappear a little bit. I can only hope, but that's what I feel, you know, that you know, the mutations of the virus and whatnot, you know, this nature's collective tsunami that we are in right now is going to ease down a little bit. For Biden, it's going straight into his 4th house and taking away his privacy, probably, you know, revealing, ungrounding him. I'm not so sure if it's good for his health. He's getting old. But then again, we have Kamala Harris. And I think a lot of feminists, including me, are sitting home going, I secretly wish that she could be president, because, you know, I don't care, you know, politicians, not politicians. It's symbolic. If a woman can rise to power like that, that's a great symbol. It's really a good symbol for Earth. She might not be perfect, most likely not perfect, but I think it would be very refreshing for the world in general to have a female president, because whether we like it or not, the president of the United States is sort of like the president of the world. Everybody's looking to the United States anyway, well, except China, perhaps. But secretly, they are, I'm sure. Anyways, she's also born at the full moon. Oh, so the past and the present, the future and the present, there's like a crisis. They're starting to listening to people, and at the same time, it's like, oh, like a crisis of perception, of understanding, and at the same time a very present persona. Like these full moon people are really out there working it. Even Biden, even though he's more gentle and like a little bit more Taurus Scorpio, you know, Kamala Harris, she's fierce. Moon in Aries, Sun in Libra, Mercury in Scorpio, Mars in Leo on Mr. Trump's Mars. So yeah, and of course, you know, the lunar nodal axis directly on the ascendant descendant. And when you see people who have that, you know, that's one of the indicators of a very important lifetime in this round. You know, you have to look to the rulers, because the lunar axis itself is not making a lot of aspects. It doesn't have anything other than Ceres on the south node over the signs, conjunct this. But other than that, we would have to look at the rulers, which is Jupiter and Mercury. And especially Mercury is important here because it's the ruler of her north node and her ascendant. So anything mercurial that goes on in Kamala Harris's life is definitely super important. Now, she's born just before Mercury retrograde. So not just before, she's born, you know, before a Mercury retrograde. So during her life, she will have, in her adult life, as of 2020, Mercury will be retrograde in Capricorn, whereas her sun reached the south node. This is kind of a karmic time for Kamala. Of course, that's what we would say, being evolutionary astrologers. We'd say, oh, wow, something's coming back to kind of like change her. Maybe she I mean, you see a potentially very stubborn woman with south node in Sagittarius, ruler Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. She might have had extreme opinions that might not be so good for her future service. Fortunately, the south node is in the 7th house, so it, fortunately and unfortunately, it might not be her opinions. She might have adopted opinions that weren't hers in order to get somewhere, you know, in order to get something done, you know. And I think that's been a little bit of the disputes around her integrity or what, you know. Mercury is retrograde by progression. If you want to see when that happened, we'd have to go back to, oh, I didn't bring in that chart. I'm so sorry. We'd have to go back to 2013 when Mercury went retrograde in Kamala Harris's chart. So you would have to see a little bit more into those details to see what happened in her life at that time. It's the ruler of her north node. So it's like the secondary progression of her life. Other than that, she's also moving into a progressed, come back, Kamala, progressed full moon phase. That's going to be in 16 months. It's going to be in, it's going to be in about 3.5 years. And there's stuff going on in her chart around that time that I find extremely interesting, because in about 3 years, Pluto will square her sun and square her moon. Yeah, so it's like something is building in Kamala Harris's chart that is extremely important, and it's going to go down in about 2 to 3 years' time. And she will have to use her words wisely. A little bit of that impulsive, fierce moon in Aries energy, she would have to tame down, tone down. She's going into her Gemini phase, where she's understanding a lot more about people's multitude of needs. It's not such a luxurious position to be in, actually, when you have to listen to all the people. So this is the now chart. I thought that was interesting because she actually has a lot of transits going on, as like there are more things happening in her chart than, for instance, I thought happened in Biden's chart. But she has recently come out of a lunar return. And, well, Mercury has recently been retrograde. There is a retrograde Mercury happening for the time being. It's now direct, it's still in its shadow phase, and it crossed her Sun-Moon opposition. Pluto and Saturn are both positioning themselves from the 8th house into a T-square, becoming the third limb of a T-square between that sun and the moon. Her whole persona is changing. It's really a shift. And then Jupiter comes along as well. So this is a chart that's on fire, to be quite honest. And as we can see, it's like, if we think a little bit, it's like, okay, that Pluto thing, it's coming in. It's like yeah, the change has really started, but it will continue to increase in intensity as Pluto really hits that 27th degree. Ironically, on the Pluto of United States. That's the same degree. So if she doesn't become a president, I will eat my hat. That's what we say in Norway. I don't say, did you say it in everywhere else? I don't know. Okay, so Mr. Trump. Yeah. It's no fun. He said yesterday or something like, I'm a good, I don't know if he's a good winner, but he's definitely not a good loser. He hates losing is difficult for me. And that was like whoa, that's very honest. Wow, thank you. For anybody with Mars and Leo, losing is not easy. This guy doesn't like to lose. So he's also more or less a perfect moon opposition. He's also an eclipse baby, like one of those born under a perfect eclipse. It's just, why he became so famous and known. And, somebody with the sun on this North Node, they know how to take up space. It's like, I'm over here, and sorry, Donald, there's a lot of Trump shaming going on. I don't like it, to be quite honest. We have to fight more decently than that. Come on, I don't care how stupid people are. I've been one of, I can roast people as well, absolutely. But yeah, I'm working on it. Okay, so he's also recently, just like, we saw about 12 months ago, a year ago, he had a lunar new moon phase in Virgo, in the 11th house. So maybe, he's looking like he's really being humbled. And his whole presidential career, the time span has been with the first part of his presidency was with progressed lunar phase in a balsamic phase in Leo, and then a new moon phase in Virgo. Yeah. Maybe for him, it's about becoming more service-minded, more service-oriented, understanding, what it means to serve. And if that doesn't, like if he can't get out of that Leo thing, then of course it's going to be quite a struggle for his soul, remember, to have that consciousness. Yeah, this is the guy who, when I first saw that he would be a president, I thought, wow, he could benefit from doing some work on himself, as a human being, because evidently there's a lot of insecurity in there, but he's grown with his, being a president and I don't think people are inherently evil. I think they are inexperienced and ignorant, and I think that goes for a lot of people. But this guy is bad news for the United States, because his sun is directly on the United States' Mars, As you remember, it was over here. So it's really been triggering so much anger in people. It's like ridiculous. It's ridiculous, to be quite honest, how people can do stuff like that. Just like blah, 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 and bang, bang, bang. And I have the moon in Sagittarius, so I'm just going to say whatever I want when I want to say it. And I'm not going to be polite. He lowered the standard so insanely for what people can allow themselves to say to other people. And it's spreading like wildfire. It's like people are like, we are copying our leaders. We have something called mirror neurons in our brains. And he probably copied his leader, like he just, probably his father, there's a huge parental conflict in this nodal axis. So anyway, he's going into a new nodal phase, and it doesn't look too good actually, because it's like this crowded 12th house with Mars, Neptune there. One thing is to have Mars in Leo, that's in the 12th house, but to have Mars in Libra conjunct Neptune in the 12th house, that's slightly less sane place to have Mars. So I think, he's been losing control a lot, maybe it's been overwhelming to his psychology in ways that we haven't been able to spot because we don't know him. We don't see him in his private life. He's been very hyper occasionally. That's what I've been picking up, at least, like who tweets 40 tweets in 3/4 of an hour, like very Gemini hyper in a way. So evidently he's not grounded enough. And that's a classic overwhelmment, becoming overstimulated kind of 12th house thing. So at least now he needs to take better care of his body and serving his, body, and, like being a little bit more humble maybe would be a good idea when the progressed moon is in Virgo. If he was my client, I'd say, so do you eat enough, Donald? Do you get enough sleep? You need to do that. You have to take care of your personal routines. And he had that, I don't know, the COVID that most people don't think was COVID, and I don't care. But, he seems very Leo strongish, like if somebody with the sun on the North Node, they have it vitality. That's one thing, that's for sure. Like I'm the last one standing. That would be the moon, and plus that Leo ascendant. So he has that that vibrant vitality, childish Gemini Leo thing going on. So yeah, here's his transit, and he has a lot of interesting transits. Venus squares his Mercury. Mercury squares his Venus. The nodal axis return. So I was like, ooh, these aspects are way stronger than Biden's, but still, there's such a tight margin here. It's like he probably, with that Venus square Mercury and Mercury square Venus, he probably rallied quite a bit the last couple of days and actually managed to, if we compare it to the prognosis, which said that Biden had way stronger lead than Trump, he seemed to have taken in some of that distance between him and Biden the last couple of days. And this could be the positive influence of that Venus, Mercury, Mercury, Venus thing. Like it's really like charm tour at the end there. And getting all those people on the fence to move in your own favor. But the real proof in the pudding is this thing going on in Capricorn. Nobody can escape it these days. We are all becoming Capricornized. It's opposing his Venus Saturn. So this is not just, his losing is not just a shitty thing to do. It's also a personal tragedy for him, financially, probably, mostly, because Saturn, Venus in Cancer, opposed by Saturn, Pluto in Capricorn, is probably going to dig out some of his economical challenges, and his tendency to exaggerate, probably with spending and how he's been dealing and wheeling with his economy. So, as Maurice once said, Maurice Fernandez, he said it was about Saturn connecting to the nodal axis. He said, well, if the police don't get you, God will. And that's a very Saturnian thing, like, oh yeah, so there's no escape from this one. And then you would just have to accept that actually, no, there's not. So there's a bit of a karmic time for him coming in, especially Pluto opposing that Saturn. I've never seen that aspect to be very, oh my, what a fun time I'm going into, like, ooh, Pluto opposing my Saturn. I remember my mother had that, and my father mentioned it yesterday because I had told her that, listen, Ma, just chill down. Pluto is opposing your Saturn, and da da da. And I gave her the dates. She had recently bought a new flat, and she was so upset about it, and in a very Aries style. And I told her like about this Pluto opposing Saturn, and she's like, shoulders down, she could breathe again. She's like, I've never been so depressed in my entire life. Nothing goes my way, she said. It feels like the gods are opposing me. And I immediately took one glance at a chart and ooh, there's like this Saturn Pluto thing going on. I'm like, ooh, you better be patient, Ma, because it's not over yet. And she had, no, it's over. And she's much lighter at heart. She had to go through some real karmic shit there, way she was thinking, how she reacted to things, everything that pertained to actually Saturn in Cancer, which she shares with Trump. She's born the same year. Not the same degrees, though. She's a little earlier. And my father said it yesterday. Yes, your mother mentioned that you had mentioned the astrology for her and the Pluto opposing Saturn. Evidently, she had taken notes and really took it to consideration and like, wrong. So it's clockwork. And therefore, it's clockwork for Donald Trump as well. And looking at his, going back to his progress chart, there is, a new lunar phase here. The Libra ascendant has reached 2958. This is very dependent on the actual birth certificate, if it's the right one. This is evidently from his, I checked it, it's from his birth certificate, but who knows? Nothing is real these days anyway, so I don't take nothing for granted. So therefore, when I'm looking at the progressed ascendant, I'm always like, we have to know if your time is completely correct if we want to work with the angles at that particular degree and those minutes, like 29:58. That's very close to the Scorpio ascendant. The timing of when it will go into Scorpio ascendant depends a little bit where the person is born and how fast that ascendant is, because it changes very drastically the further north you get. You're exposed to like, for instance, during, it changes. Like sometimes here in our northern hemisphere, we have long periods where the Taurus ascendant is really long, but now it's really short. It's like, oh my goodness, it's out, really quickly. And Leo ascendant, and like it lasts for a longer and shorter time, and therefore it changes as well with faster or slower speed during a progressed phase. So it's not 1 degree per year or something like that. You can't really, there's no mean motion to the ascendant. It depends on the geographical location of your birth. In this case, we're in New York. It's well beyond the horizon, I thought, the equator, where you would have a more even mean progression of the ascendant and the angles in general. But anything above or below that, it will start to shift. And the further away you get from it, the stranger those the motions will be. So for him, but it's in the hood, like it won't be too long before his progressed ascendant is moving into Scorpio. And we know what Scorpio is. It's time to go in deep, yeah. I'm sure if he loses, which seems to be the obvious thing, despite the very planetary juice he has going, it will be a time of introspection for him, and probably also some of that Scorpio loss and rejection, that feeling going on for him. So yeah, so that. Sure. Oh my goodness. All right, that was it. You know, I will stop my share. Go on, I can talk. Yes, well, when that is said, I would just say, God bless you all. I hope you have a beautiful time where you are, and that, yeah, that you feel a certain lightness in your hearts. So yeah, thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Sol. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.